He terrorized Huntsville for more than a year before he was caught. John Paul Danishka was known as the Southwest Molester in the late 70s. He spent the last 31 years in prison, but he'll soon be up for parole, a thought that has at least one of his 18 victims terrified. The woman shared her story with Way 31's Haley Baker.
John Paul Danishka was sentenced to 830 years in prison for raping and assaulting 18 women in Huntsville. He's only served 31 years, which is only 4% of his sentence. He is up for parole in August, with the chance that he could be released. But if one of his victims has her way, he'll remain in prison.
He kept telling me to shut up. I remember that. He kept telling me to shut up.
Tony was one of the first victims of the Southwest Molester back in 1978. She has since changed her name and asked us not to use her last name in fear John Paul Danishka may be released from prison. With many of his victims, including Tony, he stalked them, making sure no men were around. Then he would attack.
Everything that was he used was mine. The knife, the hammer. The only thing he brought in was a table leg, and you can imagine it was a sexual assault, so you can imagine what the table leg was used for.
Danishka did not necessarily fit the sexual predator profile. He had a good job at a company in Huntsville called Amway, where he worked as a computer programmer. He also had an IQ of 170. But this man did unspeakable things to women here in the valley.
He progressively got more violent. I mean, what he did to me was bad enough. So I can only imagine, you know, how much more violent he...
And he did get more violent, according to police. Retired Huntsville investigator Bud Parker remembers this case like it was yesterday.
Beat him with radio antennas, hammers, clubs. You know, he was violent, and he was getting worse. It's a miracle that this subject did not kill a victim.
Parker helped catch Danishka back in September of 1980, but not with DNA evidence, but by a single tire track.
The Subaru dealer, after it was reported a small blue car, and found out that John Paul Danishka had bought a new Subaru, and we ran a check on it and got a hit on him. He had been charged with the same thing in Illinois and was here in Madison County on probation.
Yes, Danishka was convicted of the same thing in Illinois. He served his time in prison there, then moved down to Huntsville to live with his brother. But finally, in September of 1980, the reign of terror this man had on Huntsville was finally over.
He terrified Huntsville and Madison County. And there was also one victim over in Limestone County.
Even Parker agrees Danishka does not need to be paroled. He saw what he did to his victims.
They got lifetime sentences. These victims are going to have to live with this the rest of their life. And this man should pay for it the rest of his life for what he done to these victims.
Tony agrees he should continue to pay. 5 years ago, she rounded up 2,000 signatures to take to Danishka's parole hearing. Now she started again, hoping to get 3,000 signatures before the August hearing in hopes he will never get out.
But he needs to die in prison. He really does. And the sooner the better. And I know that's like the unchristian thing to say, but the world would be a much better place without him in it.
The late Wayne Sharp, a former homicide detective who helped solve this case, traveled to Montgomery for the last parole hearing. Before he died in March, he wrote a letter saying why this man should remain in prison, and that letter will be reviewed at that hearing. Meanwhile, a homicide investigator with HPD will travel to Montgomery in Sharp's place. Tony will also be there to address the parole board and present her petition with hopefully 3,000 signatures. And you can help her. She started an online petition, and we have it linked to our website at waytv.com.